Hello, happy Monday. So great to see all of you. And Joe, yeah, thanks for joining us, really. So I suppose, although we're a couple of minutes late, we just wanted to kick off because this is the second of our kind of LinkedIn Live series that Joe and I have put together. And we've been doing this for, God, many months now. I do actually need to date check this before I bring this up again, Joe, because I feel like I talk about it all the time, but never actually say how long we've been doing it for. But our first series was called Can Recruitment Crack Inequality? And it really kind of looked to discuss the important role that we feel that recruitment plays in tackling the inequalities that we just see in the workplace, but also kind of society at wide, and the impact recruitment kind of has on that. But we wanted to really start to take this discussion a little bit further, to discuss it at a much kind of more depth, and talk about how businesses future-proof their talent pipelines, essentially, and the strategies that they need to ensure that happens. So Joe and I are here today on a Monday. We don't normally come up on a Monday, but our diaries are so chocolate at the moment. It's the only time that we could find together to bring to you the latest episodes of the Hiring Wake Up Call, the talent pipeline you'll wish you had built sooner. But before I do, Joe, hi, it's been great to see you.
Hi.
I've been off for a week. So fresh from the south of France has been lovely. But I know I wanted to ask you if you would give our wonderful audience a brief overview of the work that you do. I know that we come and collaborate together and do lots of kind of project delivery, but talk to me about kind of your journey to kind of get to this point, essentially.
Okay, I'll keep it snappy, I promise. So my background is recruitment. I've been in the recruitment space now for 25 years, and no, I didn't start when I was 16. I've just got loads of Botox and filler. Let's keep it real. I was on desk recruiting for many years, over 17, moved into a learning and development role, got an opportunity from the brilliant Matt Ashby Cooper, who said, you know what, do you fancy being a trainer? So I did training for a bit, and at the same time, with his guidance and help, got into ED&I, DE&I, whatever acronym we want to be using. Set up my business, spent a few years doing that, loved it, and then set up my business. Spotted over COVID, spotted a bit of a niche, a gap. I didn't think that anybody was really focusing on the recruitment side of D&I. Okay, we were taught, there was big social movements happening over that time, as we know, and there was this like immediate call to action. Companies wanted to be seen to be doing something, and I just thought, look, this is a missing component part. I always talk about this stuff. How can an organization ever become truly diverse and represent the communities that it serves if it's got a broken hiring and TA system in place, right? It's just going to be a vicious circle, and they're going to continue to recruit and appoint the people that they always have, and it'd be a giant washing machine of sameness. So my work is a solution to that. I reset the cycle, seeing as though we're talking about washing machines. And I work with recruitment agencies, TA teams, and hiring manager populations. I get them to understand the basics and fundamentals of ED&I in a way that makes sense to them as recruiters and TA professionals and hiring managers. And I upskill them, build their confidence, and give them the tools to look at their recruitment processes and how they market themselves, their businesses, and their roles to talent attraction, and ultimately break down the barriers that some candidates face getting into work.
Absolutely.
So that's me in a nutshell. I'm going to fire that question straight back to you, Sally.
Well, like you, 25 years in the game, my goodness, which I think actually is quite a bloody achievement, right? And I'm looking at the recruitment industry as it stands today and the changes that it's made and making. And I actually think you need a certain amount of resilience to stay in an industry for that long. So I just want to give a round of applause to both of us for sticking it out. But like you, started in agency. I've worked on site managing large scale kind of, transformation, recruitment transformation projects. I spent most of my working life in the finance and accountancy world. which surprises a lot of people. But I absolutely loved it. I always said that if I was on Mastermind, you know, my black chair subject would be finance and accountancy and everything that kind of makes organizations tick. And I think probably over the last kind of 5 years or so, my clients had started coming to me and saying something as simple as, I need a gender balance shortlist. And me thinking, my goodness, I can't deliver that. And I'm part of the problem. I'm not part of the solution. And that's what really kind of propelled me, you know, feet first into the world of DEI. And since then, I've become absolutely obsessed with the concept and the application of inclusive recruitment practices. And I'm fascinated by how businesses position themselves on the job market. And I've seen, and I think we would have both seen, Joe, in the last 25 years, how many times that pendulum swings from, you know, that in favor of the employer and the employee, and how quickly that can move. And essentially, talent included exists to help businesses future-proof their organizations using inclusive recruitment practices as a commercial advantage and leveling out the playing field while we're doing it. So, you know, let me be clear that although our work is deeply rooted in that kind of social impact that you just talked about, this isn't a pity party, right? This is about driving business performance. And I think so much of that gets lost in the backlash that we see in the world of D&I. So much of it gets lost in terms of what is it that we're actually trying to create when we talk about inclusive recruitment practices. DEI is a concept that we want to embed in our organizations. And I think it's really fair to say that both of us in our capacities really help businesses unpick some of those myths that we see kind of play out in the employment market. And I think we need to be really conscious that some of the terms that we use are widely overused, right? And we need to use and proceed with caution. And I think one that we specifically see is this term open to all, right? And this term open to all being enough, right?
Yeah.
And are we confusing? I suppose the first question I've got for you is, are we confusing open to all with inclusive by design? You know, because open to all, as we both know, isn't a strategy. It's a default setting, and it's a default setting that we tend to produce the status quo time and time again. So
it's kind of like the fallback strategy, isn't it? Whenever I speak to any organization, I ask them, like, what are they actually doing to connect their broader D&I strategy into recruitment and talent attraction? It's just like, well, we're just really fair. We're just a really great organization. We've got an amazing culture. Anybody can work here and everybody can be successful. We're open to everybody. It doesn't matter. And then it doesn't matter what shape or size you are, you know, and we know what comes next, right? And I get it, because if I'm completely transparent, it was my attitude for years and years and years. I'm just in the middle of writing my first newsletter for a new newsletter program that I've got called The Work Recruiter. Jeremy, inspired by Jeremy Snell. I am being really open and honest and admitting for 17 years, I thought the fact that I cared, I was a decent human being, and I had really, really strong ethics, I thought that was enough, right? I thought that made me a great recruiter. And I guess it did for a time, but what it didn't do is necessarily change the outcomes for candidates who face barriers into the recruitment process. And it just wasn't, I don't think there's such thing as, as inclusion by default. It doesn't matter what our hopes and dreams are and what we believe to be true, unless we've actually deconstructed and reconstructed our hiring processes and followed that blueprint of inclusion hiring strategy. The will is not going to get us to where we need to be with the levels of diversity and difference that we need in our organizations to be high performing. So I was just like, I had to keep looking at my screen because I've, I wanted to get some like important notes, because I can be quite emotional in our conversations, Sally, right? I can talk too much from the heart and not be strategic enough on what I was sort of saying. But I think it's about, right, so really, really having honest conversations and really workshopping this out as an organization and looking at, who is applying, who's progressing, who's dropping out, who's not getting through, and at what point are they not getting through. Really understanding, like, who is it that's actually getting left behind. And I think these are the first fundamental questions before you start reinventing your hiring process. You should actually look, really, really crunch that data if you can. And then actually look, first and foremost, before you start designing anything, you what's and your whys. And that's where I always start with every organization that I go into work with, Sally.
But I think that's a really key point in terms of, I think we get very wrapped up in the narrative, who gets left behind, right? Who gets, who's not getting through. But I don't think we're spending enough time working out what is it that we're missing because they're not getting through. What are the risks to our businesses because that person with that cognitive diversity that we need to disrupt our businesses, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but we don't talk about the risks enough. We don't talk about what is going to happen to us if we don't have a workforce that is representative of the society that we're trying to serve. What happens then? And I think,
but why are we not I mean, look, that is not hard information to find out, right? With a bit of research and a bit of time spent, we could get that information. But like, why are we not joining those dots? What is the area of resistance here? Why is every business owner not prioritizing their human resources, their human capital, and looking at doing a skills gap analysis? And looking at all of these things that we know to be true about our workforce and the impact that could have in 5 to 10 years. Why are we not doing it?
I'm not sure many businesses, firstly, know how, but also understand the gaps that they've got gaps. How many times, I mean, and maybe we are jaded because we worked in the recruitment industry for so long. Everyone thinks they've got this sorted, right? Everyone thinks they're, back to the point that you made earlier, everyone thinks they're a brilliant recruiter. Everyone thinks they have a moral compass. Everyone, I think, that, and this is why I kind of open this session talking about we've got to be really careful about the terminology we use and the overusing of certain terminology, because people think they're already doing it. Oh, yeah, we're inclusive recruiters. Yeah, we have inclusive recruitment policy, because we've got a policy, because we've done a little bit of work on our VPP. We think we're doing the work. And I think, if we talk about the training that we take organizations through, the recruitment process has got lots of moving parts, right? It's got lots of people making lots of decisions, okay? And actually the way kind of bias, if we just talk about bias in isolation, creeps into that, is absolutely crazy. How do we start really unpicking and starting to build recruitment processes that enable individuals to be treated and scored fairly?
And I don't think we're even doing those very, very first basic steps by seeking feedback and actually truly understanding what the current candidate experience is. I think we're really, really quick to, if we are going to survey, we survey the people that got the job. And for me, that's wild. You know what I mean? It's like marking our own bloody homework, isn't it? And I don't think we are listening to the voices enough of the candidates who are literally pushing water up the mountain when it comes to trying to get into recruitment processes. I mean, I'm hearing so many stories from so many incredible people where I think it's wild. It blows my mind to think that these people are not getting in front of decision makers. But the recruitment process, I think, it's the biggest mess I've ever known it in the time that I've been in the industry. And yet when was the last time a candidate got asked, what is your experience of us? What could we do better? How are we impacting your experience? How are we impacting your mental health? What is it that we are doing that caused you to take yourself out of process? What is it that caused you to not even apply in the first place? And it's just like, we have this captive audience who are probably more than willing to give us feedback. And I just think we're not even starting at that point. Before we can start to critique, deconstruct and reconstruct the recruitment process, it's not necessarily what you and I think is best practice. We need to listen to the people who have been experiencing it in the last 6 months, I think, to be able to add to that audit process. Does that resonate?
Yeah, it really does. So, are we then making the mistake that, even if we had fair processes, they are resulting in fair outcomes? What's the data telling us there?
I mean, I don't think we're even, a lot of us are just, we're maybe sticking to this blueprint, right, of what inclusive and accessible and equitable recruitment looks like. But I think that is, it's got to be embedded and tailored in a way that is right for that organization, that addresses the key pain points. It might be that organization has got a lot more work to do before it starts to look at its employee value proposition, redefine its career pages and make them accessible. We've also got a lot more work to do before we start upskilling and retraining hiring managers. I definitely feel that it's all got to be that very, very basic starting point of holding the mirror up to ourselves, looking at comparing what is the truth, what are the truths right now of what recruitment looks like for us, for candidates, for recruitment TA, for hiring managers, for our agency suppliers, and then looking at where we want to be as an organization and what has to happen in the middle. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does. And I think as well, when we start looking at, the truths of what is happening now, I think it's very easy for us to then make assumptions. So if we continued doing what we're doing, okay, if nothing was to change, the assumption would be that the processes, the process would result in unfair outcomes. Because if we, and I think we need to define individually as organizations what fair looks like to us. Is fair even the right terminology? What is it that we're trying to, what is it that we're trying to create? What is our end goal? And it'd be really interesting to see what businesses do over the coming months when some are turning the taps off when it comes to representation goals. So if we're not looking at representation, what are we looking at instead? And how are we measuring that? And what does success look like? And what do our current processes, what are the results that we're yielding from our current processes? And if there is the assumption then that nothing was to change, what does our workforce look like in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? I think it's important for us to not have this really kind of short-term view on this and see it as a tick box thing that we're going to be doing in a quarter and then all of our, prayers are answers. I think with any kind of wider talent management strategy, we're going to be thinking about 5, 7, 10 years out.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that by the time we've redesigned it and rolled out a new design to everybody, it'll be time to start again, especially at the rate in which we're seeing, technology and whatnot evolve. I don't even, it is so fast moving, isn't it, at the moment? And we do definitely need to stay on top of. I don't think the recruitment process has evolved from a tech perspective in the last 20 years as much as it has done in the last, kind of 2 years. And I think it is. Go on, sorry.
No, please do. I mean, we're seeing the fallout of this kind of firsthand, aren't we? I mean, this kind of click to apply button has completely broken the recruitment process. I mean, whoever thought that, automation and AI is brilliant, right? And we can talk about the merits of it. We can also talk about, the non-merits of it and the impact it's really having. But I got a screenshot from someone when I was on holiday last week, but I didn't see because it was on my work phone. And you'd be proud of me, Joe. I did not take my work phone away with me for the week. But basically the message was the recruitment industry is, and the word started with an F, and a screenshot of a rejection letter that they had received to say that they have received over 25,000 applications for this one job. 25,000 applications. And this individual who's in the D&I space is and it was actually a talent role, is absolutely exceptional, has got years and years experience of working in this role for some of the world's biggest brands, right? And some of the biggest consultancies, and they've been rejected because, if nothing else, right, let's just assume nothing else, just the amount of applications.
Isn't it wild that all of this stuff that we brought in, to think that we thought it would get us closer to talent quickly, and what it's done is it's just created the gap between amazing people and hiring them is just even wider, right? It's even deeper and it's even wider. And I definitely think that there's, in holding the mirror up to ourselves, we've got to really figure out, like, how did we even get to a point where 25,000 people were applying for one job? Because I don't even think it is a case of everybody's unemployed, so everybody's desperate. I just, I do think we've got to look at the market, we've got to look at the employment market, and we've got to have some serious reality check conversations. It's not like all of a sudden every person and their dog is out there looking for a role. It's because it's just so easy to click on something to apply. That whole process of absorbing information, making a judge decision about whether or not that role's for us, and then having to do several things to be able to then put ourselves forward for the role. In an organization's need to make it almost like more accessible. What we've done is just created an absolute tsunami of applications that we've got no way of being able to go through. And what it does is it's almost like we've got to go back to basics again. I mean, are we going to start asking, Sally, people to send their CVs through the bloody post?
I'm saying bring back fax machines. I bloody love my fax machine. But I think that's such an important point you've made there, right? How many years have we been talking about how do we make recruitment processes more accessible? Okay. How do we make it more accessible? And what that then has potentially done in terms of, opening up channels, because you'd argue that actually, I mean, as long as you've got kind of digital inclusion, a quick to apply button would hopefully make a role more accessible, right?
It's not the click to apply was never designed for neurodivergent or people with disabilities, right? I mean, who thought, what was it designed for? Because, I mean, show me somebody who's done a click apply now and managed to actually get the job. I mean, when I was on the market, 5 years ago, I used that button and I never got a dicky bird from it. Never, ever, ever. What was it? Was it to show the metrics? Was it because somebody was selling something and they could guarantee more hits and more applications?
I can't answer that question because of where we're streaming this to. But yeah, I think you're right. I think this has got to go across other industries though, right? It can't just be impacting the recruitment industry. I mean, I know that we're kind of, knees deep in it, but there's got to be other, tech solutions out there that have actually, yes, they've made things maybe quicker and easier in the, that kind of front end, but that back end is then just creating, a huge backlog of that, capacity can't even begin to, to manage essentially. But I mean, from your perspective then, if we were to be looking at, in truly inclusive talent pipelines, what would that look like to you? And also I want to kind of preface that with, I know, from the work that we do, it is very nuanced business to business, but what would the basics look like?
I think it would be truly inclusive talent pipeline would not just be about what we're seeing at the moment, right, where we're just seeing this focus on the metrics, right? This over focus on demographics, and what, you know, what box kind of like people tick in accordance to their identity. I think it's about understanding that, like, a more diverse talent, an inclusive talent. The inclusion side of it is all about, you know, is about your systems and your processes. And for me, it would look slower. And I know this is a wild concept, right? But I truly believe that we're in this mess because we tried to speed everything up, right? We took the human out of the process of finding human beings jobs, and we automated everything, and we wanted more quicker. And I think this is about slowing it down. I almost believe that an inclusive recruitment process that gives us that pipeline is going to see us go full 360. And we're going to look at a more traditional way of hiring with inclusion front and center. Right. For me, it's about making sure that we all educate ourselves and understand what it was that we had in place that resulted in overrepresentation, people deselecting themselves, and a lack of diversity in the first place. And we build with that in mind. And we look at slowing things down, and we look at, like, you know, we look at technology in a sensible way. We look at not from a click apply button, but how do I get more information on you? How do I create a space where you can bring your CV to life? How can I create a process where you need to do more than just send your CV? As a candidate, you need to think very, very carefully about how your skills and experience apply to this role and what value you can add, because that's what I want to assess on. And if I'm asking you to put the work in, Sally, at that end, and by the way, putting the work in could be in a whole range of different ways. It could be video, it could be assessment, it could be audio, it could be written. You know, it's all about those choices in how you want to apply. But what I'm asking you to do is to slow down in your thought process and applicant. And I'm going to make sure that I give you as much information about whether or not this role and this organization is enough for you. So going back to the inclusion bit, making sure my EVP is spot on, making sure that I've done a whole job evaluation and my job description spot on, make sure that just the basics of my recruitment marketing speaks to you and not everybody else, right? And so you've got all that information to make a sensible decision on whether or not you've got a shot at this. Whereas what we're seeing with the easy appliers are just, we're now seeing this bloody automation that will promise us 1,000 applications while we sleep. There is no thought process or considered approach from applicants. And we might believe that a spray and pray approach is a win-win, but we're only damaging it for ourselves, like, in my opinion. So going back to your questions, it's around us addressing the barriers that typically stop people from A, applying, and B, getting through to a sensible decision maker and being able for us to digest and look at the information that we've got to hand.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, perfect. Right, someone quickly write that down. I mean,
what about that like for you? I mean, what does that truly inclusive pipeline look like in your perspective?
For me, I think we need to think about what our future businesses need. Okay. And I think we spend far too much time being reactive and being quick, you know. And I say this because I've managed TA teams, internal talent teams. And obviously we work a lot with them at the moment, and their biggest metric is time to hire. Right. I mean, how outdated is that, right? So it charges the wrong behaviors. It fuels the wrong behaviors in terms of quick, let's get this job out. Quick, let's get it advertised. Quick, let's see how many applications we've got. Oh my goodness, I've got 25,000 to go through. Let's get these people in front of hiring managers who, you know, there's no consideration. So I think I agree with you. We need to slow down in order to speed up. I also think we need to be thinking about what our businesses need in 2, 5, 10 years time from
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
And for me, it's around, when I talk about kind of business sustainability, it's not talking about it from like an ESG perspective, although obviously that's important to me. It's figuring out why businesses and how businesses are going to fail, right? And this is the stuff that kind of, keeps me up at night and things that I get obsessed about. What is a real risk for us not doing this work? Products failing, services failing, customer retention failing, lack of market growth. If we are not able to effectively hire cognitively diverse individuals that feel empowered, and we could call it psychologically safe, right? That's another overused term in my view, right? But if we cannot hire effectively a team of cognitive diverse individuals that feel empowered to work as disruptors within our organizations, okay, it is going to fail. And that's it. So, if you do not invest and do the work in an EVP that authentically demonstrates that you will thrive when you come to work at this organization, right? When the pendulum swings, which it will, we all know the pendulum swings, your employers will either walk with their feet and go and work somewhere else, or they'll stop applying altogether. So I feel like, for me, what an inclusive talent pipeline looks like is what your future pipeline is going to need to look like, not your current. And we need to stop being reactive and start being proactive for how we approach this, essentially.
I almost feel like there's a missing piece of the jigsaw, and that is, I've written it down, our inability to get our heads around workforce planning.
Oh, I know. Oh, right? Yeah.
That is the key. Somebody with the expertise that understands, you can never predict 100%, but there are experts in people who do that whole workforce planning. Many organizations, it's critical to the supply and demand of talent, right? So being able to look at your organization and strategically plan as to what you're, instead of just being really reactive and, Jen leaves or Johnny leaves and we got to refill, and it's just constantly changing in our tail. Like, it's around like what about like almost like taking those. I'll tell you what it's like for me when I was a contract recruiter, and I used to supply teachers into school. I had a talent pool of teachers that I had to consistently feed, consistently grow, consistently engage with, and I would be engaging with my newly qualified teachers a year before they qualified. And it would be this like, this is what we're all about. This is why we can help you with your NQT year. A language might have changed, but we were always thinking like one step ahead. If we were out in Australia or New Zealand or South Africa or parts of Africa or parts of Canada, we were constantly predicting where we were going to be as an organization, what that would mean for how many teachers we needed. So we had the people out in the field recruiting, and then we had this beautiful engagement strategy where even though we weren't placing right now, we were keeping people interested in our agency and looking after them. And by the time they were due to come, to go out to work, whether it be this year, next year, or 2 years' time, they were already best mates with us. And I don't see enough of this like evergreen recruitment, these evergreen roles and the engagement and development of relationships with people that we're going to be working with in 5 years' time.
I think for me, though, that evergreen role is changing before our very eyes. And I think this is where the opportunity lies for organizations, and what the business case should be now for, investing in what that future talent looks like. That future talent, is not just entry-level individuals. Okay, that's not what it is. Your future talent is, bye are the skills for life. Okay, we need to design workforces that are agile, resilient, solutions focused, that can work with organizations across the globe to solve global problems, to get ahead on their competition, and to make an impact on society. And the attraction retention and upskilling of that talent is the stuff that we need as organizations to absolutely obsess about in order to prevail. And so I think for me, the first question that I'd be asking, and the one I do ask organisations that we work with, we're working with a big contractor at the moment who's just won a massive contract. And as part of that contract, there's a very strong kind of D&I element in terms of their kind of workforce planning. But I'm like, we need to take it one step further at that. What is it that you're trying to achieve as an organisation in terms of future-proofing your organisation, and how can you use talent and talent management to basically kind of, 10x that essentially? What is your business? What are the skills that your business is going to need to not only survive, but evolve in the rate of workforce changes that we're seeing right now? And I think very, very few of us are prepared for that, essentially.
Do you think a lot of us don't? A lot of businesses just don't have the answer. Is the insight out there? As an organization, am I able to go out and am I able to track down a person or a source of information that will give me a really strong indication of who I'm going to need and what skill set they're going to have?
Well, no, but that's the work that needs to be doing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're working with organizations now to kind of take it to that next level. And, and it all comes back to, how do we create inclusive, not only hiring practices, but then workforces in order to, essentially empower and kind of distribute this wealth of cognitive disruption that you're going to need within the organization. But I think, whilst the industrial and digital revolutions fundamentally shaped how, the nature of the work that we do, AI and automation is emerging as potentially a greater force of disruption, transforming not just how we work, but the work that is entailed itself. So this is why I think it's really important that we get really clear on the types of individuals that are going to enable us to evolve as organizations, as opposed to these kind of fixed skill sets in terms of, I need Joe to come in and do this job for the next 3 years. That job's not going to exist in 3 years' time. So what are we doing as organizations to essentially ensure that we humanize work in quite arguably one of the biggest shifters that we've seen in our lifetime, that it's going to impact us and our generation in the workforce, but all those to come. So, what are we all doing? What responsibility are we taking as organizations to ensure that we humanize it, essentially?
And I think also, just on a couple of things that you've said there, though, just my brain is just going, I think you said a digital AI revolution. I honestly think this is going to be a skills revolution. I'm kind of like, I am not down with this idea that, first of all, I'm not down with the idea that it's only going to be the youth of tomorrow that are going to provide us with the workforce that we're going to need. If it is, we're in shit, right? Anybody over the age of 45, right? We're in trouble, right? And something else that you said to me as well, you said just then about this, the roles are not going to stay static. When we have a job description, and we could always rely, the role would evolve, but the fundamentals would be the same forever. And you just said something there where, the role that we're doing today is not going to be the role that we're doing in 3 years' time. So it's almost like planning for the skills revolution, and actually looking and doing that workforce planning and looking at who we've got and looking at how best can we be almost constantly upskilling and reskilling. I wouldn't be looking at like mass redundancy right now. I wouldn't be looking at, what roles are going to get lost to AI. I'd be looking at whose roles are going to evolve and probably get eaten up by AI. Where do we need to take those people? How do we upskill them? How do we retain them? How can we make sure that, otherwise, if we don't look at that approach, like that upskilling and reskilling revolution, all we're going to be doing is hiring, firing, because the roles will be obsolete. We'll be eating through them every 24 months.
But if you then think about, right, let's say there's 100 companies and they all take that approach, the latter approach, not, what impact is that then going to have on society? This is what we need to take responsibility for, right?
Mm.
Is hire at fire. And I think the thing is, and this is where I want to see some of the changes, is that businesses are getting really excited about, oh, what can we automate? Oh, who can we get rid of? What roles can we make obsolete because we want to save on, headcount cost? No one's actually then saying
Looking at redeploying humans. Yeah,
upskill, right? Yeah,
yeah,
upskill.
yeah.
Absolutely. How do we ensure that we are an organization that stands for something in terms of kind of societal impact? And I think, organizations, if they're not doing anything around this already, they're already too late, right? If you haven't started looking at this already, you're already behind the curve. Um,
Mm.
and I think, probably the last point I want to make, because we've been talking for 40 minutes, is,
Crikey.
I know. Let this be clear, right? This isn't about how many humans we can replace with AI and automation. It's about what impact AI and automation is going to have on our humans and how can you navigate your business through that change, right?
Mm.
And how do we center that essentially around that employee life cycle? So the skills that we need to hire in, right? The skills that we need to upskill. How do
Mm.
you improve and create safety around those individuals who are hearing from all different kind of algorithms that they're going to lose their jobs in 2 years' time? The stress and impact that's going to have on families across the world is
Yeah.
just
Well, it already is, isn't it? It's already we're all already starting to hear conversations around, especially around the. I was reading something like only last week about the conversation that I don't think we're having enough of, which is around the scarcity of entry level roles.
absolutely.
Those traditional roles that were first for first jobbers, that where you go into an organization, you learn your trade, and then you begin moving up and so on and so forth, your beautiful career trajectory. Because a lot of these entry level roles are being they're being taken by automation and AI
Mhm.
for efficiency for the business. So there isn't as many opportunities. So it's about a rethink. We can't just say we can't just stop our early careers hiring all of a sudden because we've got computers to do their jobs, right? Because if we don't do that, we've got no pipeline of talent to then move up into the organization. So it's all, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a business in a business owner's shoes right now, thinking about, well, how do we actually navigate that?
Mm.
How are we bringing in our early careers talent, our first jobbers? Where do they slot into the workforce plan that we've got? I don't
Mm.
know. Have you got any thoughts on that? Are you seeing anything or hearing anything around this?
I think my
Essentially.
well, I'm hearing loads about it because I'm going to loads of webinars and panel
Mm.
discussions around, the impact of AI and the responsibility that we play in terms of that workforce planning piece. And I'm developing a product at the moment that's going to help organizations do that. But I think what we've been talking about today, it opens a whole can of worms, right? If we talk about, well, it could go down in this direction, and actually we need to consider this, and we haven't really talked about the line manager responsibility and about, that workforce planning piece, which I think is probably the overarching thing that we need to focus on. I think my probably key takeaway from today's discussion is there is so much more at play here than just inclusive recruitment. Okay. There are so
Yeah.
many different moving parts that are going to be nuanced depending on the organization that you work for, where you are in your kind of maturity in terms of how even future thinking and forward planning you are in your organization. But I think it's about, we have been working with a couple of proposals with companies recently who want to talk to us about inclusive recruitment practices and kind of taking us, us going in and taking them through the kind of the audit, the upskill, the evaluate, the kind of embed, etc. But I'm like, before we do this, we need to all take a step back and say, this isn't just a TA issue, right? This is a
Mm.
whole business thing.
Mm.
So who do we need to get round the table to talk
Yeah.
about this proposal?
Yeah.
Because things are going to have to be changed off the back of it. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point that you've made, Sally.
Unless we've got everyone in agreement around the table, this is the direction that the business is going and this is their why. And we do, I mean, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but we do a great session with business leaders called the business case for, because every one of those decision makers, the business case is slightly different. Okay. Mm-hmm. We're coming in saying it's the right thing to do, right? We want to talk about actually why we need to make these changes and how it future-proofs your business. And I think that is part of the diagnostic, because if you haven't got that why right, and that why is going to be individual to each organization, you can't even begin to do the work.
And you're just scratching the surface, are you? If you just, if you're just focusing on this, on this area of hiring, and you're not thinking about this, this workforce planning piece and being fit for the future.
Yeah.
Whatever you do now is going to fall by the wayside when we've got to deal with these big gaps in skill sets. So I think all of it goes hand in hand, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely does. So anyway, if you do need our help, you know where we are. We were here, we know, but we, even if it's like kind of what, building out what that business case is, I think sometimes, we're all we talk loads about the proposals that we send out the door, but I think sometimes you just got to really dig deep into what is the business case? What is it that you're trying to solve, rather than coming to to external supplier like us and trying to get something off the shelf, which isn't going to have the impact that you want it to. You think you need it, but actually you might need something completely different. So I think for me, it's all in that diagnostic right at the beginning and figuring out what it is that you need.
And that's why you do what you do.
That's why I obsess about this stuff. And even though I'm on holiday, it keeps me up at night now. I'm joking. I actually slept. I slept while I was on holiday, which was lovely. Right. Final thoughts from you. What have you got planned over the next few weeks? You're always all over the place. What can we be seeing more of from you, Jo Major?
So I now have my fully Jo Major on demand program, which is flying off the shelves. Well, it should be anyway. Full suite for everybody involved in the hiring process. I believe, I know this sounds cheesy.
Have we lost her, or have we lost me?
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Oh, sorry, you froze then.
Oh, sorry. It's probably because I was moving around so much.
Yeah, you're doing that.
Getting so excited. I believe it's my best work yet. I'm really, really proud of what I've done. And that's available for I've got a really punchy pricing strategy for it. There is no way anyone's turning around to me and saying this is not affordable, right? I've done a tiered system or individual license, and you can have a whole range of different add-ons to the program. But what I've done, I've designed it so everybody can get on it. Like your entire hiring manager population could get access to me training them on inclusive hiring and talent attraction strategy. Once they've hung out with you, though, maybe, Sally, it might,
Well, I don't know.
What about you? What have you? I mean, you've always got loads going on as well.
We are all over the place. I think Natalie and I counted, we've got about 40 client visits coming up over the next couple of weeks, which we're really, it might help if I get my voice back before, but they're really, really excited to see what's happening. The businesses that we're helping on the recruitment side at the moment, interestingly, and this probably hasn't changed over the last 12 months, are those that have tried to do it themselves and got completely overwhelmed, overwhelmed. They're coming to us saying, the one who has had 25,000 applicants hasn't come to us, but I wish them the very best of luck. But they're coming through saying, we put this D&I role out there. We thought we'd get a really good response. We have, but we now can't see the wood from the trees because everyone's CVs looks the same. So we're helping with lots of organisations like that at the moment.
Are you still doing the recruitment piece for ED&I professionals?
Yeah. And you know what as well? My background's finance and accountancy, and Natalie's is kind of HR and talent, but we're also helping organisations, trying to actually broaden their talent pools. in terms of actually representation. You know, when it, I mean, I hate the term diverse hiring, but when it's coming to representation, they're coming to us and saying, look, we are still trying to move the dial in this particular area. Can you help us? We need support unlocking different markets. So it's been really good actually getting involved in other roles as well. So,
can't help yourself, can you?
Do you know what?
Once a recruiter, always a recruiter.
Bloody recruiter. No, we love it though. We love it. And that's what we're here for. We're here to, either come in as a consultancy and help you figure this stuff out, or find you someone who can. I was talking to someone the other day. I've been out all over the place and we really have to go. But I was at Ascot. I was very fortunate to go to Ascot a couple of weeks ago, and I met this incredible woman. And and the thing that we connected on, and I've got a post actually coming out about this, is I can't, but I know someone who can. And I think that is, and she started off in recruitment as well and has gone and set up her consultancy. It is the thing that kind of keeps us alive, isn't it? In terms of, I can hear what you're saying and I know what you need. I can't help you, but I know someone who can. And that buzz you get from that kind of making that connection never goes away. So yeah. See what happens over the summer for us. I'm excited about it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, great conversation. I've loved it, as always.
Me too. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks for a bit more of the same.
Take care.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.